What's up, y'all? Welcome to the Lift Big. Oh, I just said opposite. That's awkward. The Live
I feel
Big.
like it's going to happen.
The Live Big, Lift Big podcast. I am your host, LCK, and with me is Alex Maclin.
What up?
And today, we were kind of chatty Cathy's, and so we basically wanted to do an episode kind of titled something around like the 10 fat loss mistakes you might be making or you're probably making. And so we definitely just talked. And so we actually have quite a few to get through today. So we're gonna
yeah, so this is gonna be part 2 of that continuation of that episode, because we definitely ripped a lot on, the first 4 points that we had. And so now we're gonna finish up the other points that we have.
So
actually,
just go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, so like in relation to relevant to this episode, actually I just started a cut. So like a fat loss, like started on January 1, just like everybody else did. So
wait, bro. Are you trying to get shreddy for Egypt?
I mean, hey, we're going to be out in the hot sun. You're going to be taking my shirt off. So,
So what you're saying is that, I know I'm going to be the camera woman because I have to be, the hype woman. But what you're saying is that you basically just want a shirtless picture on top of the camel.
I kind of want to look like an Egyptian mythological god. That's what I'm saying. So, haven't done a cut in a long time. So we'll see how it goes.
I mentioned to my dad that we were going to Egypt, and then I instantly regretted it because like the dad jokes started happening. And so he was like, oh, so you're going to like learn how to walk like an Egyptian? I was like, I'm just going to jump out the window. Like, stop. please stop.
Oh, that's amazing.
Well, that's sick. So I think that would actually be super interesting. Like, do you want to spend a minute or two and just kind of talk about how you're personally tackling that in terms of like, what did your nutrition look like the past few months leading up to this moment?
Mm-hmm.
Like what's your maintenance? Where? Give it.
Yeah, I think that'd be cool. Yeah, actually, so my nutrition has been, like I said, I haven't done an intentional diet or for fat loss in about 4 years. So last time I did an actual intentional cut was back in 2019, where I cut down to 165 for a jiu-jitsu tournament. And since that period of time, I've only been either eating at maintenance or I've done a couple of surpluses over the past several years. So I did a surplus when I was training for a half marathon. And then I did a surplus recently, but it was cut short because I got hurt. But other than that, just been sitting at maintenance and gradually increasing my training to the volume that it's been at for the past like year. So, I train jiu-jitsu about 6 times a week, and I do, Paragon, 3D program like 3 times a week. So my maintenance is sitting around like 3,300 calories.
Doing the most. And I mean, I'm like 5'8", 100 and I think I've been around like 180, like around that mark for last 6 months or so. And then, so just gonna do a little, 11-week total cut. And, I dropped my calories down to about 27, 28. Protein still staying around 175 to 200, pretty flexible on that. But yeah, doing the flexible tracking thing, but, like a 15% cut, which we'll talk about more later about like, cutting. But, I definitely am one of the types. I just want to kind of get it done and get it over with. And I know my body. So I'm just going to do like a little bit more aggressive. But it's still not bad. Cause like even at eating like 3,200, 3,300 calories, like I was having to like force food down because there's so much volume. So it's really not been very challenging to like cut that much from my diet and still be fine. Are you going to change up anything with your training, or are you just leaving it as
I'm going to leave it as is as much as I possibly can. Obviously, if I experience fatigue, then I will change up my training. But that's also part of the reason why, we talked with Brian last week, about strength versus hypertrophy. The physique cycle, the 3D physique cycle are going into a strength cycle. So I'm actually going to go do the hypertrophy cycle to align better with just like the fact that, I'm going to be in a deficit and I'm really not going to make
I'm not expecting to make strength gains, and I don't really want to have that high systemic fatigue because I'm already doing jiu-jitsu.
So you started that January 1st, and it's currently January 12th. So have you seen any progress yet? Or
yeah. I mean, I've lost like 2.5 pounds already. So I mean, I'm not going for any particular goal, any like number goal or any body fat percentage goal. I'm just literally curious to see how my body responds after not doing a cut for so long. Cause I just haven't, I was just actually one of the main reasons why I did this is so that, I coach a lot of people that, I help with fat loss. And I was like, can I even do this myself? Like, do I even remember how like, I know I do it for other people, but like help other people. But like for me, I haven't done one in so long. And I was also curious, like, if there was any type of, because I train so much, like how could I navigate that? Could I still train the way I want? So far I haven't had a problem with it, but I mean, it's also only 11 days in. So.
Totally. Well, and I think that's super dope too, because I think that's such a testament to kind of that idea of like earning the ability to cut your calories and earning the ability
100.
to diet. And so it's like, I think that's like the biggest thing that probably people miss is that it's like, if we aren't just constantly dieting and you're trying to take from the ATM when it's empty, like it's like when we're actually in that position, the body is actually like extremely responsive. And so like how cool is that though, that it's just like, it almost feels easy. Like, yes, we're having to sacrifice. Yes, we're having to make changes, but it's again, not this like white knuckle, choke out somebody at jiu-jitsu type thing.
So far, honestly, it has not been that. I mean, like I just made a post today. It's like my eating, my habits, my lifestyle, nothing has changed other than I'm just eating 15% less calories than I was eating before. Like and as we talked about this, I've like on the previous podcast, like a lot of the foundational habits I've already built, they already support health. They already really support fat loss. I just was eating more calories at maintenance. And so it's really just as simple as reducing your calories. That's it.
Totally. Well, and think about that too, right? It's like, that's the biggest thing that we also kind of talked about on the last podcast too, is it's like, it's such a different experience when you're trying to form all these new habits and change all these things and be consistent and also, eat less food versus like truly if it's just like, okay, well, I was averaging 3,200 calories. I'm gonna eat, it's like 300, 400 calories would be like a big ass cookie. Like it's not,
like for me, it's not like apple juice. Yeah.
Well, let's I think it'd be good to just kind of recap the points that we had talked about on the last podcast and then kind of keep cruising. But ultimately just, it's like, I'm sure we kind of pieced this together, but in retrospect, I was like, ooh, if I could have reordered how we did that, probably should have done this. But basically just understand that ultimately, if we are trying to lose body fat, we're trying to see, a change in our weight, we have to be in a calorie deficit. And so there's no getting around that. We can create that via a mixture of moving more. We can create that via eating less food. And so, we're definitely big on trying to keep things as simple as possible. And so I just can't advocate enough for like, rather than, coming out the gate being like, hey, so I'm going to eat less food, but I'm also going to start doing more cardio and exercising and doing all these things. It's like, yo, like again, that's nutrition is a sauce. Like, let it be simple. Because again, if you think about it like a giant science experiment, you wouldn't be, willy-nilly in the lab, just, changing 11 billion things. It's like, you would change one, see what happens, and then kind of keep going. And so we kind of topped off the points of basically, again, just not doing the prerequisite work to be there, and kind of that idea of earning your right to diet, as I give little air quote fingers, trying to change too many things all at once. We spent a lot of time riffing on being too strict with food choices, and kind of like Alex said, it's like, truly the way we're eating probably shouldn't be massively different. We're just eating less quantity. So it's like, maybe if you're eating like half a bar of chocolate, during living and loving life, maybe it becomes a little bit less and stuff like that. And then finally, just the idea of eating for volume. So again, making sure that we are not the Snickers bar, we're not walking around hangry, and that we're actually getting in tons of fruits and vegetables and stuff like that. So I think this is actually an awesome segue, because the next point that we had noted to kind of chat chat about was this idea of cutting calories too fast and too aggressively. So, Alex, I would love for you to kind of talk about how this concept that's like, we're trying to diet on as many calories as we possibly can.
Yeah.
And why, it's like, well, yeah, you could just like drop into a drastic deficit, but like that doesn't work. So you want to kind of take the mic on that one?
Yeah. I mean, the thing is that, a lot of people approach dieting as like, just, I'm going to slash everything that I'm eating. They're going to cut out a lot of foods and they're going to cut out a lot of calories. Yeah, that works in theoretically and technically, but the problem is that like good, you're not going to have a really easy time like sticking with it. That's where it just becomes really difficult. Everybody, I always have this saying, well, some of my clients, like everybody want to be lean till they hungry. Like, like if you are sitting there, slashing off like, 25% of your diet or even more than that, like, let's just say you're eating 2,000 calories and you start, hey, I'm going to go down to like 1,200 calories. You're going to be starving and it's not really going to be very sustainable. And it's also just going to be very hard to implement because that's a huge difference in terms of how you are eating. Like, I mean, yeah, I said earlier, like I haven't changed very much because I didn't cut very much. Like it's not that many calories, but if you're cutting like 800 to 1,000 calories, that's almost an entire. That's like a meal at that point. Like that's more than a meal if you're having a 2,000. That's a meal if you're having like a 2,000 calorie diet, right? So yeah, that's a drastic change. So you don't want to make like super, super drastic changes if you're trying to make the most sustainable fat loss efforts.
Well, and also too, it's like the quote I would always come back to is it's like the fat loss that comes fast is often the fat loss that doesn't stay. And so I think the issue, right, is it's like at some point or another, every single person has, whether it was like following Pinterest or, magazines at the grocery store or whatever, but it's like they would follow some crazy diet or end up just eating, really, really low calories. And so the issue is that it would work, right? And so it's like, and that I think definitely that's a thing where it's like, we can like do something really stupid like that and it works. And it's like, that happens one time. And then your body's like, absolutely not. Like we are not doing this shit again. And so it's like the next time you try to pull that, obviously the, flags start getting thrown and stuff like that. So it's like understanding also just again, if we talk about the analogy of like, if we can get from A to B a billion different ways, if we have the option of eating, say, 1,800 calories, or we have the option of eating 1,200 calories, well, why would you choose to like to suffer more than you need to? Like if the outcome is going to be the same, because it's like, I think again, people just get so concerned about like, how can I lose this as much as possible, as fast as possible.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's not the sauce. Like we're just looking for kind of this transient thing. So it's like when you're setting up that deficit, the way I would, especially if you're doing it self-guided, like if you're not working with a coach, I always kind of encourage people, well, like, hey, physically like set this up on your calendar. Like if we're starting this party on a Sunday, like, hey, go in your calendar. And so my recommendation would be, start with a 10% deficit and then wait 2 to 3 weeks and then kind of assess, see what's happening. Keep in mind that, again, the scale isn't only the marker that we might want to be paying attention to. So definitely be taking measurements, be taking pictures, because, again, we can lose weight and the scale doesn't change, or we can change your body composition and the scale doesn't change. So it's like just double check yourself in that manner, because, again, it's like most people, when you see yourself every single day in the mirror, you're going to be like, oh, I don't look any different. And then you see your friends and they're like, yo. So definitely, it's like, just check yourself. But, my recommendation, if I was going to give like a general, how to DIY your fat loss, it would be like, hey, start at a 10% deficit, wait 2 to 3 weeks, kind of see, have we made any progress? Do things kind of seem to be the same? Okay, let's go to that 15% deficit. Same thing, wait 2 to 3 weeks. And basically at whatever point the scale starts moving or we start seeing changes, that's where you stay. You don't get greedy. You don't keep taking from the piggy bank and be like, I'm just... Though, like... No, they do. Get your paws out of the cookie jar, man. Like just freaking sit down and be patient. So it's like whatever point the scale starts changing, we start seeing changes, just keep riding that, because, again, it's like at some point, you're going to have to keep dropping calories, or you're going to have to start adding in more movement. And so we don't want to do that, sooner than we have to. I think that I really love the way that the boys from Mind Pump Media talk about dieting and stuff like that too, because they're always like, yo, like, save any additional steps, save any additional cardio for the end of the thing, not the beginning of the thing. Because again, it's like, if we're changing all these things, we just don't know what's working. And again, like, patience is the hardest thing, because all of this is going to take longer, than you want it to. But, at whatever point, like, let's say you're at a 20% deficit, you're seeing progress, and then all of a sudden, it's just like week 2, week 3, week 4, like nothing going on. What would be your initial inkling there, Alex, in terms of, would you continue to take away food? At what point are you like, oh, okay, let's also start adding in additional steps as a way of, getting more calories? Like, where is that for you?
I mean, I think it depends on the individual, right? But, if we've already cut quite a bit of calories off, there's only really so much that I would suggest cutting. I think we talked about this last time, but I mean, if somebody hasn't lost and they've cut like 25% off their diet, or they've lost maybe and they're at that point, I think that's where you got to think about, hey, like, maybe we take a break here for this a little bit, right? But, if someone wants to keep going, I mean, the only way that you can keep it going is if you continue to create a deficit. So, I mean, it really is going to be like, hey, we have to reduce your calories further, or we have to increase your energy expenditure somehow. But there's definitely finite levels to where that will not go any further. And I think it is important to, like, if you do go into a diet, have a ceiling, like, or like at least like a bottom level that you're gonna set for yourself. Like, don't go below that. And I think that's where too, like, working with a coach is very important, because a coach can kind of set that boundary for you. I've known a lot of people who I've, worked with, and they come across and then they're like, I asked them about what their diet was like. And then when they cut, and they're like, yeah, I was eating like 800, 700 calories, and, they're a full grown ass woman. Right. So, that's, to me, that's not right. So, and they didn't really have any knowledge or guidance or experience with that. So I think that's where really a coach is coming into play. Like, if you are cutting your calories and you're going pretty low, and you haven't, and you feel like you have to go low, or you haven't seen the result, I think that's where you got to, like, take a step back and then go hire someone to help you.
Totally. And also, it's like, I hate the important caveat, but it's like, also just like double check yourself in terms of like, oh, are you forgetting to log your coffee? It's like, I forget what I went to track yesterday, but it like, it suddenly added like 3,000 calories to my stuff. And I was like, oh, and so I had to like, it took me a second to figure out like, where's the actual serving size for this? Cause it just defaulted to a weird thing. So it's like, sometimes people they like track stuff, but then it's not actually the right serving size that matches like what they actually had.
Yeah. I mean, if you've double checked your due diligence, your adherence to the plan, you are doing what you're supposed to be doing, or you believe, and you still haven't seen the things happen, and you've cut, I really do think that's where you gotta look some outside help for that.
I will say, I would add too, it's like, if you are somebody that you're just not generally super active, so like, let's say, yes, you do go to the gym, 3 to 4 to 5 times a week, but you're not necessarily getting the right step output. So if you're somebody that you're really just getting, like 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 steps, sometimes it really is like, you just got to move. And so it's like, that's why we kind of recommend, it's like, hey, a really great baseline is kind of getting that like 7,000 to 8,000 steps a day. Cause it also just like that level of output also just changes your hunger. So it's like, if I've ever had personally a day where I was just like glued to my computer, I'd be like, shit, like I'm not hungry if I don't like get my steps, even though I do like train hard and stuff like that. But it's like, if if you're at that point where you're like, okay, I'm at a 20 or 25% deficit, I don't really want to cut my food anymore. Basically, what you would be looking at is the idea that if you kind of add on getting an additional like 2,000 to 3,000 steps a day, we're just going to have a little bit more calorie burn there. And so, if you're currently averaging 7,000 steps a day, basically what that would look like is, hey, well, I'm going to take that up to 10,000 or maybe 11,000 steps per day. And same thing, like let's say, again, at a future date, you're like, okay, like I still want to keep going. I still feel good. But again, I'm not trying to cut my calories any further. Well, maybe you do. It's like you might end up getting, 12,000, 15,000 steps a day. But it's just, again, it's kind of another tool in the toolbox of we don't necessarily want to add additional cardio because that's going to add that additional strain and recovery kind of component. But it's like, think about it. It's like if you just go for a walk or you go walk your dog, like
demanding.
It's not super demanding. It's not going to be changing or influencing your hunger levels a ton. So that is kind of the toolbox. Is it's like, well, at the end of the day, we either have to move more or we have to, kind of take away more food. So that would kind of be our advice on that one. So cutting calories too fast, too aggressively, aka getting greedy AF. Next one, we have not actually tracking your macros to ensure you're in a calorie deficit.
We got to be careful about this point because this could end up like the last episode where we talked about for 40 minutes on this because this can go deep.
So for me personally, and again, we both understand, tracking your macros isn't for everybody. It definitely can for certain individuals. It can be a pathway to getting obsessed over food, eating disorder like tendencies and stuff like that. So certainly again, it's like this isn't the end all be all of, oh, you can only lose fat if you're going to track your macros. But again, I will just say, it's like not tracking your macros. So not actually logging and keeping on top of how much protein, carbon, fat, and calories you're eating in a day. If ultimately we have to be eating less than our maintenance calories and we have to be in a calorie deficit, not tracking your macros when you're dieting is kind of like trying to do, like a home renovation project in the dark without a flashlight. Like we are quite literally bird boxing our way there. And so just understand, it's like the pro or the benefit of tracking your macros is we're just going to get from A to B in a more efficient manner. There's going to be less bullshit. There's going to be less, agony. Because again, it's like for so many people, I think the issue is, without nutrition education and an extensive background like you and I both have, it's like people will see these big, fancy, sexy diets of, intermittent fasting or keto or, paleo or whatever it is. And so again, it's like, well, the reason why those work is because we are also usually no longer eating the highly palatable, foods that people love overeating. And so that's how it's creating the deficit is it's like, well, normally 90% of your diet is like bread and pasta and all this stuff.
And then you switch to liver balls or cow testicles. Yeah. You switch to cow testicles and you get shredded.
Bro,
like Liver King.
I've been getting so many DMs lately, especially from women where it'll be like, oh, can you talk about carnivore diet? Can you, and I'm like, no, like it's actually so dumb that like I cannot waste my own time with this. Like I don't know. I'm sorry. I love eating things that are delicious and I don't want to eat just meat. Like that's my, mic drop. You can tell me again. It's like, I think I made this joke in my story the other day because somebody asked and they're like, hey, like, can you talk about doing, like cold plunge and sauna and like the benefits of it? And I was super honest and I was like, listen, you could literally tell me that doing sauna and cold plunge every day would make me like a bajillionaire and I still wouldn't do it because, freaking weenie and I don't want to, right? I don't care what the benefits are. I just like, I don't want it. I don't want, it's like, yeah, I could like dust you in a workout or like bury you in a whatever, but I just don't want to suffer in that way. So I'm not going to do it. Right. Same thing, it's like with these diets, it's so weird because I feel like we just see this like kind of circulation where like something will be super hot and that comes back again. And it almost reminds me of like trending audio on like Instagram Reels where you're like, let's not bring this back. Like, can we keep the horse behind the barn here and like get out? So just understand, ultimately with any of those diets, the reason why they work is at the end of the day, you're eating less calories. But again, it's like it's just that choice of operations where, hey, if you truly feel like you don't have time to weigh and measure food and track your macros, that's fine. Just know that if you were working with me or working with Alex or another coach, it's like if you were tracking your macros, we could get there in a hell of a lot faster of a time. And so again, it's like there's no right or wrong, but man, that's the sauce, man.
Actually, I wrote a post about this today. So like, I also want people to know like there's different levels to tracking food, right? And I think, tracking your macros to like the gram or your calories to exact numbers and weighing your food out on food scale is definitely like one way to do it. But honestly, if I was working with somebody, I would rather them have some kind of awareness in general. So even if you have to start like, hey, we're just going to like take a picture of your food, that's better than nothing because at least you can start to see like patterns. And the whole thing about like tracking food with fat loss is that you start to see what you are doing honestly, right? And that's the biggest problem with people with fat loss is that you have no idea what you're doing. Like I can guarantee I can ask somebody like, hey, what'd you eat last Tuesday? No idea what they ate if they didn't, if that's not written down, right? So you have now a record and you have, what you are doing, and then you have something now to change if you feel like you need to change it, and you also have a way to help keep yourself accountable, which is like the main benefit of like tracking food. So, even if you're not tracking food to like the nearest gram, like I would suggest some way of tracking food so that you can have that awareness and accountability.
Alex, I know you just actually shared a testimonial from a client that they did not track their macros. Do you want to talk a little bit about kind of what that journey looked like? Because I think for a lot of people too, it's like understanding the level that you're at. And so if we kind of talk about like the fitness analogy of, hey, like if you're already a pretty lean individual and you've been training for a while, well, to massively gain a lot of muscle, you really got to have things dialed in and like you got to work hard. Or same thing, it's like if you're already a pretty lean individual, well, you're going to have to dig really hard to change, reversely, if it's like we're talking about somebody that is coming from a place of, oh, hey, I'm not really consistent with training and I don't quite have a lot of habits dialed in. It's like it's kind of comparing apples to oranges. So I think it'd be really cool to kind of just kind of briefly cover what that journey looked like for your client, because they did. They experienced a lot of fat loss. They just didn't track their macros to get there.
Yeah, so I had a client, he lost like 26 pounds or so. It basically changed his habits, right? Like that's one way to approach it. Again, I think what I'm also trying to say is like, yes, like tracking food definitely helps. It's not the only way to get to there, but ultimately, like you do need to make some habits or saying some changes so that you can create that calorie deficit over time. And we worked on some food choices, which is what we did. Now, I will say this, is that he did actually log food. He just didn't track the calories. We didn't have any kind of calories. We didn't have any kind of calorie or macro targets. In fact, he couldn't even see. So Chronometer has this, so I use Chronometer with my clients, Chronometer tracking app. It has this great feature if you work with a coach that you can basically turn off all the nutrition information. So literally it's just like him writing down what he was eating. And that's it. Like that's all he did. He did weigh his food out. We did talk about that. He did weigh his food out, but he didn't know how many calories were in his food. He just wrote it down in the quantities. And that was enough for us to see like, okay, well, this is how much you're eating, like roughly this portion. So eat a little bit less of this, maybe a little bit more of this, and that's it. But there still has to be, I think, some degree of like awareness about what you're doing. It's like, if you were trying to save money to go on vacation, and you never tracked your expenses and your income, yeah, you could save,
and go on that vacation, but it'd probably be a lot easier, be a lot cooler if you did, if you like actually, tracked your expenses and see, oh, I can actually save realistically $500 a month and I can go on this badass vacation in like, 3 months. So
it's like the FAFO compared to, fuck around and find out. It's kind of like there's so many analogies though, kind of with finances and with nutrition, because it's the same where it's just like, listen, like the more rigid and the more we dial it in, the easier it is to either, save more money if we want to buy a house or go on vacation, or, same thing, kind of with dieting. So I think that's perfect. It's like for so many people too, I think too, it's just like, kind of like you were talking about, like the honesty thing. Truly, it's like what gets monitored gets managed. And for so many people, it's like as a nutrition coach, it's always funny because you'll be like, man, like this person is like insert the blank a lot. It's like you might talk to somebody and it's like I used to make this joke actually with dating, but it would be like, man, I always have a red flag whenever the statement comes out of a dude's mouth where it'll be like, yeah, I don't really like drink that much. And then you start hanging out and it'd be like, bro, what?
I feel like you've had personal experience with this.
Way too many. Because it's like when I say like, yo, I don't drink too much, like it really means like, like once every couple of months, I'll be like, yeah, margaritas with my taco. But it's like, that was a huge like dating red flag for me. It was like, dudes would be like, oh yeah, I don't drink very much. And they'd be like, every time you would talk to them, they'd be like, oh yeah, I'm at the bar. Oh yeah, I'm grabbing a beer while I watch whatever. So same thing. It's like it's kind of like that people's perception of what they're doing versus what they're actually
perception
doing.
Versus reality.
Can sometimes be a lot. So I think that's all great. Next point number 7 that we had was the idea of perpetual dieting and diet hopping. Alex, I'll let you start with this one.
So I mean, at some point, you go on a diet, right? At some point, you need to take a break from the diet. Now, there's a lot of ways that we can look at that. There's no like set rules in stone, like how long you should diet for. But I mean, if you're constantly restricting calories and taking calories down, at some point there's going to be that ceiling where we talked about you reach, right? Like that bottom level where you're not going to be able to really take away any more food. You're not going to be able to add any more activity and then still enjoy your life or even be healthy, right? If you got to think about like dieting for fat loss, if we break it down to like its essence, it's like controlled starvation. It's like controlled form of starvation, right? So at some point, that's not going to be healthy. So if we continue on this path of taking away food and continuously packing on more movement, more exercise, we're going to have problems with our health, like our metabolism, our thyroid, our hormones. Like, I mean, we don't have Brian on the show, but he knows that kind of world where like you have competitive bodybuilders and like after their shows, like a lot of them have problems. So, because they do go to like extreme levels of leanness and extreme levels. Some of them do go to extreme levels of dieting in the process.
Have you actually ever watched, because I was actually going to recommend like listeners to go watch this, but have you watched a ton of like Christian Guzman?
Yeah, I was just actually thinking about that, like because we watched that season together like what, 2 years ago, right?
Yeah, it was on YouTube. That was like Panini times because be like,
on
I don't know what else to do.
And he got, he did a diet, he got really shredded, but then he rebounded pretty hard. Yeah,
totally. Well, and the biggest thing was it's like there would always be jokes from his girlfriend where it'd be like, yeah, we haven't had sex in a while. Like that ain't happening or this, that, and whatever. So it's like same thing. It's like I'm so excited to interview our friend Tiana, who's kind of gotten into the bikini and like, figure shows and stuff like that. And I'm so curious to kind of hear again, it's like, it's just so fascinating to see how the body responds with certain inputs and stuff like that. So, it's like for so many people, like we just have to understand that ultimately our body has to deal with whatever bullshit we give it, right? So it's like if we're not eating food and we're constantly dieting, well, our body's literally got to figure out. And so it kind of starts doing what it needs to do. And it starts shutting down various things that just maybe aren't as important to actual survival and stuff like that. And so it's like, again, like I'm it. Like this was me for so many years. If I look back, like I spent my teenage years. I spent all of my 20s and all of college, my late 20s, like all of it. It was just like, I was never not dieting. It was just the extremes of like, well, how hard am I dieting? But it's like at the end of the day, it's like every single day I was always obsessing over, okay, well, like, what does the scale say? Okay, what do I look like? What do I look like in these clothes? The weirdest, like I said, it's so interesting to like look back on things once you are past it and you no longer, do that, or it's been so long. But it's like, I used to like check myself out in the mirror all the time by like, they kind of call it like body checking, but it's like, I would like pull up my shirt and be like, oh, do I still have abs right now? And it's just like, why was I so obsessed with that? And I was so like, just obsessed with it. And so, just understand that ultimately, it's like your body has to adapt to whatever you do. And so that's kind of that idea of metabolic adaptation. You might see somebody that it's like, well, for years and years and years, if all you ever ate was 1,200 to 1,400 calories, well, again, like your body does the things to figure it out, and it almost becomes normal, or it might even become not miserable for you because that is just your normal. And so, it's like same thing when we're trying to work our way out of that, can be quite a shit show. For so many people, it's like a lot of times you might have to gain weight to actually, change that situation and just get your body, kind of back to a healthy place and stuff like that. Which, again, we will for sure do, a podcast
that's
all
like
about it. All about
reverse
that,
dieting.
but.
Yeah. Well, like Laurie, so like if we're talking about, dieting and reaching that point where, hey, like when should we put the brakes on? Like, what are you looking for in terms of like when to put the brakes on dieting? And then like, what does that even look like?
I think ultimately, and this is probably just because I worked with so many women over the years. And so I got really, really skilled at being able to help people achieve fat loss or achieve body composition changes without having to use the scale. So it's like we hope that we can accumulate as much data as possible, but it's like, at the end of the day, if this is gonna like cause a mental spiral, we're not going to use it. And so I got really, really good at just being able to make changes based off of just purely listening to biofeedback and listening to how people are feeling. So again, it's like that's a thing where it's like if you're paying attention on a regular basis and you're suddenly like, oh, hey, well, like
like my sleep sucks. My
sleep,
hungry.
like I'm suddenly not sleeping through the night, or especially, it's like when we start seeing period changes and we start seeing changes to our menstrual cycle and stuff like that. I think a perfect example is it's like the number of brides that I worked with over the years where it would be like, hey, I don't want to, drastically have you cutting before the wedding because I don't want you to rebound. But like, if this is what we got, this is what we got, so let's put a bow on it. Let's figure out how to just make it the best we can. And so, it's like, we just have to understand that our menstrual cycle is always a few months behind. And so if we're experiencing a lot of symptoms, if we're suddenly experiencing, say like 35 to 45 days between our menstrual cycle, or we're suddenly dealing with, super heavy, super crampy, super uncomfortable periods, when that's not normally our thing, or that's not normally our norm, it's like we have to dial back and look at, well, what were we doing a few months ago? Because it's like they say, the follicles for all of that take about 100 days. So that would make sense that, about 2 to 3 months. But, so it's like that would be super common where it'd be like, oh, well, let's say if they got married in September, well, we dial it forward and it'd be like October. And then it maybe be like November and December. They're like, hey, well, like, I don't know what's going on, but like I'm having like the period from hell. And then sure enough, it's not reflective necessarily of anything in the moment, but back in time.
So I think oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So I was going to say, like, in general, it's like we're looking at things like, well, how is your mood? How are your energy levels? What's your digestion doing? What is your menstrual cycle like? It's like just also, again, like sex drive and stuff like that. Sex drive, morning wood, if we're talking about that.
You ain't getting that WAP if you're down on 1,000 calories a day, man.
No.
The WAP is not there.
It ain't happening, man. So yeah, it's like, and that's the thing I think a lot of people miss too, is it's like, again, they're so hyper focused on like, what is the scale doing? But it's like, how many people like have you worked with over the years actually, where it'd be like, yo, I want to diet. And you'd be like, I don't think you're in a place to diet, man. Like just kind of looking at your situation. I don't think so. And they'd be like, no, but I want to diet. And you'd be like, all right, so I'm going to just make a prediction. Like, again, that's the fun part about coaching, is it's like, it's kind of like parenting. Like we can advise you, but at the end of the day, like how we move forward is your decision and stuff like that. And so it's like, it'd be like, yo, I don't think you're in a place to die. And they'd be like, yeah, no, let's do it. And then, all right, so we cut like 15, 20%. And they'd be like, 4 or 5 days go by and you get the text where it'd be like, so I feel like dog shit and I'm dying during workouts and the scale went up, and you'd be like,
oh man,
I tried to tell you, man, like sometimes the only way to, get in bed with that is
gotta figure it out. Gotta FAFO.
So, recap, it's like at the end of the day, just understand we should be eating at maintenance more than we do anything else. Obviously, if we are severely overweight or we're severely obese, for sure it's going to take time to get to that point. But again, if we use the analogy of treating our body like an ATM, we got to be making deposits, aka eating at maintenance or having periods of calorie surplus more than we are trying to make withdrawals and spend that money. Next point was not following a strength training program with progressive overload. And so not lifting, not following progressive overload. Alex, get it?
No, I think you should tackle this one because this is you.
This is my sauce. So I think first and foremost, like obviously understand that at the end of the day, however you enjoy training is valid. And so if you're like, hey, actually, I only run. Like I don't lift. I don't enjoy lifting. By no means am I saying, oh, please stop running. And hey, this is the only way to do it. But just understand, it's like for the people that we work with, like this is what I do for a living, is run an online fitness company for people that love lifting and love training hard and stuff like that. So I just want to start with that preface because it's like, listen, like at the end of the day, if you go to Orange Theory or if you love spin class or Peloton, keep doing whatever it is you love, because again, it's like the goal with exercise is A, please freaking enjoy it. But B, you have to be doing something that you love and enjoy or you're not going to keep doing it. And so it's like, if that's the thing that keeps you moving, by all means, keep it moving. But I think the biggest thing, and I was guilty of this for so many years, and it's part of why getting with Brian and actually following his training starting in 2017 was so life-changing for me, is it's like, I always thought that I was following good workouts. Like, it's not like I was on YouTube, crowdsourcing like random workouts. I wasn't following workouts off of social media from somebody or anything like that. It's like I was following very well-known programs, especially with CrossFit and stuff like that. So I was following Invictus and CompTrain and Misfits and all that stuff over the years. But I wasn't, again, it's like my goals and what I was trying to accomplish were like this. They were not, it's like, I think my favorite like emoji on iPhone is like the handshake emoji, but it's like my goals and, the way I was training and the programming I was following were never quite in alignment, because it's like, I would be like, oh yeah, my goal's performance. Like I want to be the best CrossFit athlete I can be, but every single day, my reality was also being like, oh, why don't I have better abs? Oh, I'm really hungry, but, I already hit my macros today. So actually, like, I should just not, listen to my body and I'm going to just do this, right? So it's like, I wasn't in alignment there. And I think that's the hardest part, is it's like, we can have it all. We just can't have it all at once. And so kind of getting people comfortable with having phases with their nutrition and having phases in different periods of time with their exercise, it's like getting those in alignment is so, so important, because again, it's like, it's just that idea of, again, if everything's on the same ship, we can sail into the sunset and get from A to B. But it's like when we're kind of having this push and pull of, oh, well, I want the aesthetics, but I also want to be the best athlete and be competitive and all this stuff. And it just like, again, we want to help people find that happy middle, but mutually understand, we just can't also mutually live at the extremes of like, I'm super shreddy and mutually, I can also lift the most in the room. It's just such this kind of like delicate balance back and forth. But basically, progressive overload would be a program that increases in difficulty over time. So if we're talking about, we're doing a 6-week strength cycle or a 6-week anything cycle, we're just training, it's like maybe if we squat 200 pounds during week 1, that looks like, hey, week 2, we squat 205. Week 3, we squat 210, et cetera, et cetera. So that over the course of the cycle, we are getting stronger. We're actually seeing progression in that way. But for so many people, it's like their training is just so random and they're chasing almost like too much of the novelty. And it's like, it's like the levels of like, what type of results are you wanting and how fast are you trying to get there? And what are you trying to get out of it, right? Because it's like, I know you used to talk with your clients, like when we used to hang out like 24/7, 365, and we were just like always, with each other. It's like, I know that you would text me all the time because you'd be like, dude, like people just like don't understand how dialed in your nutrition is and how much you move and how active you are and all these things. And again, it's like I used to joke that I think that if most people saw the level of attention and the level of time that those things took. So the amount of time I was investing in the way I'm eating, the amount of time I was investing in my training and being active, most people probably wouldn't want that, or most people wouldn't, they would have a really big coming to Jesus of like, oh, like, yes, I'm seeing progress, but I understand why I'm not seeing, maybe that much. It's just such a difference, right? So it's like, I think just helping people understand the idea of following a really good training program and following a plan, right? So it's like with Paragon training methods, all of our programs are periodized throughout the course of the year. So that means like, hey, we're going to have a hypertrophy cycle, and that's going to be followed by a strength cycle, and that's going to be followed by a hypertrophy cycle, and that's going to be followed by a strength cycle. In addition to every single cycle has a specific goal or a specific thing in mind where it's like, hey, during this cycle, we're trying to gain strength. Hey, during this cycle, we're trying to gain as much muscle as possible, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's like, again, just the difference of, well, if you're just doing random class workout or, just, throwing shit at the wall, right? Versus, well, hey, it's like truly, if you talk to bodybuilders, which I still, it's like to this day, if you ever talk to me about like, oh, would you ever like do a figure show? I'd be like, bro, I have gotten aboard the sauce in terms of like, oh, I really like hypertrophy and bodybuilding. I really like stuff, but still, it's like, even when we talk about like Brian, my business partner's training, it's like, all of his stuff is repeating movements. So like A, B, C, D, E on Monday, repeat every single Monday versus, with Paragon programs, it's typically like, well, okay, if we back squat and we deadlift on a Monday, you're going to see that every Monday, but the rest of it, has a little variety, a little difference. It's like, I'm definitely in the middle ground of like, I need some diversity, but it's just enough. But same thing, it's like when we podcast with Brian, we talk so much about like how hard it is with like CrossFit when you're just kind of used to like everything, access to everything in the candy shop versus like, well, when you start following, the programs that make you look really good or give you the physique outcomes, being comfortable with monotony and being comfortable with doing the same things over and over and over.
If it's boring, it's probably working pretty well. Like that's the thing. Like that's what I think a lot of people have a hard time accepting. Like if you're doing the same things and it seems monotonous, that's good.
Well, and it's like, I think there's a great analogy too there where it's like people struggle on the nutrition front where it'll be like, oh, but like I just really love food and I love pizza and I love all these things. And it's like, well, yeah, don't get me wrong. Like I love movement diversity and I love, all these things. But at the end of the day, my why and my goals is bigger or more important to me than constantly, like kind of stirring that pot. Right. So, just understand that, ultimately when we're talking about trying to help you, when we're chasing physique outcomes and we're saying, hey, I'm trying to lose body fat, I'm trying to improve the way that I look, just understand that, again, hypertrophy, that basically means muscle building training, that what that would look like is, hey, I'm lifting in higher rep ranges, I'm hitting all the volume, all the sets, rather than, obviously strength training, we talk about lower reps, we're lifting like 3 sets of 3 deadlifts. So, it's like hypertrophy be like 3 sets of 12 to 15, 3 sets of 15 to 20.
We're lifting to support building muscle or maintaining the muscle that we do have, like while we're in a deficit. Because if you're in a deficit, you can't, our bodies are obviously having less energy coming in. So like building muscle is not, it can happen for some people, but it's not an expectation. But you can keep the muscle that you do have. So doing things like strength training, or like rather hypertrophy training, can help maintain that muscle and result in a better physique when you do cut, not looking like, was that a melted wax candle, right?
Dude, that was an old throwback. I think actually I'll throw it out there, because I think initially the person that made the post, I wish I could remember who that was, but they were like, yo, like, can we get
such
people to follow?
Because that is literally.
Yeah. But the other one was like, I think it was a fleshy dildo. So it was either, yeah, like I said, like a little more explicit. But
that's how to get you shadow banned on Instagram for sure.
Right. But yeah, it's like when we're training, just understand again, it's like, ultimately, when we lose body fat, we're always likely going to lose some muscle with that exchange. It's really hard to just like straight up lose body fat and have nothing else. And again, it's like things can happen. That's not always the case, but more likely than not, understand you're always going to lose some muscle when we are dieting. And so the idea of following hypertrophy and the idea of bodybuilding during that time is that it's going to support you maintaining as much of that muscle and hopefully not losing it, as humanly possible. Next, we have chasing performance goals.
Oh,
how I kind of miss like 2017, 2018 me that would just like rage and it'd be like, but it's true. It's like,
yeah. Go ahead.
I was going to say, it's like, I know we've both like made this post, but it's like, I don't know why people always try to go big, and it'll be like, hey, not only am I trying to like lose mad body fat, but I'm going to run a marathon while I do it. And you're like, wait, what? Like, wait, let me get this straight. Like, you're going to go run for hours on end on zero food for the course of several months and think that, that's going to be a good outcome. Like,
I mean, it's some people, obviously some people can do it. But I have the philosophy is like, just because you can do something doesn't always make it a good idea. The thing is about all this stuff, like if you're talking about doing fat loss, again, remember what I said earlier, it is controlled starvation. So you are literally eating less calories, you're getting less energy coming in than your body actually needs. So if you start to tack on something that is going to be highly demanding of energy, then you are just digging this massive hole. And the problem is that like if you continue to do this, number one, reaching this goal that you have, this performance goal, is going to feel like a very, very difficult uphill battle. You might even have some negative effects from it, like getting injured, right? And then what do? If you're training for a marathon or a half marathon or something like that, or whatever, right? Like some kind of performance-based goal, and you get hurt halfway through training. Well, you just spent all this time like doing all this stuff, and now you can't do any of it. So now what, right? So the thing is like you can do all these things. I'm not saying like I'm definitely a person that like, me, like I'm jujitsu, like I'm doing all the things. I ran a half marathon. I trained for a half marathon in 2020. I trained for a half marathon. I did Paragon workouts and I did jujitsu, right? I did all these things. You might call me crazy as shit, but I also ate. I was eating like 3,800 calories a day. I was eating like a 500 calorie deficit, right? Or I'm sorry, surplus. So the thing is like, you can do performance, but you got to separate the two, if you're talking about fat loss. I think that's the best best approach to it. You don't always have to do it, but I think that's the smartest way to go about it.
Side note, Alex. So we moved to San Diego in 2 weeks, just a little bit over 2 weeks. And every day Charlie keeps coming home and he's like, I think I'm going to get my purple belt before I leave. So
he should be, man. He should be for sure. He should be.
So if you can just start going to jujitsu like 7 days a week, I just need you to like maintain that upper hand. So somebody's got to put me in place. No, I think you're 100% you. It's like, nutrition is so tough to talk about because there's just so much nuance. And it's, we don't ever want people to live in a vacuum where it's like, oh, you can't ... But it's just like I said, it's like, there's levels where it's like, hey, like, we talked about this too on previous podcasts, but it's like, if we really, really understand with training that if we're kind of chasing multiple things, so like, let's just use like the running and the lifting as an example, it's like, we're probably not going to do both of them incredibly well. And so that doesn't mean, again, it's like, by all means, if you enjoy running and you enjoy lifting, keep doing them during a deficit, while you're chasing fat loss. But again, understand how to kind of moderate or how to change those two and understand which one is a little bit more important to you at this moment in time. So it's like, again, personally, it's like, we know that cardio can make you very hungry. And we know that running, especially depending on the intensity of that running, can just really stimulate your hunger response. So it's like, if I was going to create an ideal world, it'd be like, hey, well, okay, could we lift and bodybuild 3 days a week? Could we run 2 days a week? But hey, however it is that we're normally running right now, could we either slow down the pace of those runs? Could we slow down that distance? So like kind of pull back on, hey, well, if you're normally running like 5 miles this day, well, could we pull back to like 2 or 3 miles? So again, it's just like, if we kind of think of it kind of playing this tug of war of just kind of finding where's that sweet spot where it's like, hey, we can keep productively, again, working towards being a better runner and building our endurance and all of that. But mutually, again, it's like, we just shouldn't see the drastic tip off, or we shouldn't see, that drastic drop off. And I think the hardest thing, right, is it's like our body, again, will make it work until it doesn't. And so it's until like that first month, you might be like, yo, I'm doing the most, I'm running, I'm lifting.
That's kind of where I'm at right now, Yeah. So I definitely have to keep that in mind, Yeah.
So it's like, it does, it can just quickly like, kind of catch up with you. So, just again, kind of getting people to think about the bigger picture of, hey, well, if we can really have a little bit better plan on when we plan to be doing certain things with our nutrition or like we want to do these endeavors, it's like just trying to separate them out or trying not to have a ton of overlap. Again, you can have some because again, it's like, it just shouldn't be miserable. And if dieting is super miserable, I would venture to say there's probably changes that we could make and there's things that we could do that might elicit a little bit better. Finally,
we at the
10.
end? Oh,
we at the end. I will call myself out. I love talking about sleep, kind of like how I love talking about hydration, because like, it's like, if people saw how tragic my sleep was or my inability to freaking drink water, they'd be like, who is this bitch? Like, get out of here. So the backstory is that I don't know. I am most productive and most creative at nighttime. And it's really not conducive to work. It's really not conducive to content creation. So like, I actually, I put up a Q&A box on my story today. And like the very first comment, I was like, damn, getting called out. But they were like, why are you up right now? Like, it is 5:30 in Chicago. And or maybe it was 4:30. I don't know. I think I went to bed at 2:30 last night, but it was just like, it's for me, there's just kind of this give and take where it's like, it's not always tragic, but if we have it's like if we have news cycles or we have a lot going on with Paragon and work stuff, or if we have apparel drops, it's just like, at the end of the day, your girl's a bad bee. It's like, I'm doing majority of the things I got to get done, and it gets done when I get it done, right?
But you're also not dieting, so you're also not trying to like diet and sleep on and have no sleep.
Totally. So it's like just know if I had like 2 toxic traits, it would be like, I really suck at the whole sleep thing. And then I really suck at not being a cactus. And I really have to be intentional about drinking water. And
why is sleep so important for fat loss?
So I think we just have to understand it's like sleep is the secret sauce to adaptation. So when we're talking about fat loss, we're talking about muscle gain. We're trying to gain strength, improve our performance. If we're trying to be the best athlete we can be, it's like our body just it needs that time to rest and recover and relax and recharge. And so it's like, if you kind of think about it, just like with your job, right? It's like, if you had to work 7 days a week, you'd probably be getting really pissy and really upset with your boss because you'd be like, yo, like I got stuff to do, a life to live. And so same thing, it's like when we're chronically just kind of driving our body on empty, it can work sometimes, but it's not the best way for the long haul. And so I think with sleep, it's like we know that if somebody gets, less than say 5 to 6 hours of sleep a night, we just start seeing all these negative things happen in the body, almost like negative feedback loops where it's like, oh, well, like our insulin sensitivity, like your physical response, like, oh, I'm eating carbohydrates, suddenly changes for the negative. Or I think a big one, I think about this all the time. I used to always, when I worked at a CrossFit gym, I would have to get up at 4:30 in the morning to coach classes. And so it's like, I wouldn't ever go to bed earlier. So it's like those days I just like chose violence and didn't sleep. But my digestion would be, right? It's like my digestion when I would only sleep, that couple of hours versus like getting a full 7 or 8 would be super whack. Or I think like this happens a lot with travel with people. Like let's say you choose violence, you book like, do you remember that time we booked like the 5 a.m. flight to Miami and we were dying at the airport?
I think I tell myself I will never do that again. And it's like, I always end up doing it again because it's just like, well, I'll be fine. And it's the cheapest flight.
No, I will pay more money. But it's like we see that a lot where it's like people's digestion will get really jacked up during travel. And a lot of times where it starts is actually on the front end of, oh, well, I booked a super early flight. I went to bed at midnight. I had to get up at, 4:30 in the morning. And like your digestion just gets so whack. And so it's like, again, if you talk about it, there's so many different ways, but it's like your body just really likes sleep. And so when we stop doing that, it's kind of like with shift workers, like we see, when people's circadian rhythm and their sleep gets just doesn't get the attention it needs. It's like, stuff goes so sideways so fast.
Yeah. Also cravings too. Like, cravings are like, if I find that when I don't sleep as well, I'm like, I want all like the sugar and carbs. Like,
you're like snacky.
Yeah, I'm super snacky.
Snack daddy.
Snack daddy. No, snack daddy's in the house. If I'm sleeping, like if I get a really poor night of sleep, like I'm really, really snacky. And then that is actually something that's been established, like shown, like your appetite changes when we're chronically underslept. And I mean, the thing is like if you're trying to, lose body fat, you're trying to stay at a deficit. If you're sitting there like grabbing handfuls of this, handfuls of that, like, and probably not tracking it, let's be honest, right? Like, I mean, that stuff's going to add up, and you do that enough times, you're no longer going to lose body fat, period. So,
well, and two, it's like what I personally experienced too is it's like, I might be super snacky or I might just never feel full is like the bigger overarching thing. It's like, you just like are kind of this bottomless pit where you're like, I know I've eaten enough today. Like we are not, falling short here, but like, I'm just hungry. So it's like, again, it's like, if there was really one thing that somebody was like, hey, like 3, 2, 1, I'm about to diet. Like that would be my big one is like sleep would be like in the top 3 of like, get your house in order and figure it out. Right.
So I have a question. Like, well, 1, how much sleep should we try to shoot for? And then 2, because I hear this question a lot. It's like, let's just say we didn't get enough sleep the night before. Should we go work out? Because the thing is like if we didn't sleep, we're probably not going to have as much energy. And then, okay, if we don't go work out, are we expending enough energy? I hear that a lot from clients and things like that. So how would you answer that?
So I always want to start this conversation about sleep with like talking and just kind of throwing like the asterisk out for parents, because it's like, I forget what the meme, like I wish I remember who made the meme, but it was talking about like, hey, listen, like if you're talking about nutrition fitness on Instagram and you're trying to like educate, if you're not a parent, please stop trying to give sleep advice to parents, because guess what? It was 3 a.m. and, my 3-year-old came in with like a disco ball, doing whatever. And so it's like, I think about that though. It's like, bro, it's like, again, I will say like, I love Brian, my business partner with Paragon so much. I love my oldest brother so much, but it's just like they are birth control by like proximity, right? So it's like, when I call my brother and like the kids are screaming in the background, I'm like, yep, that ain't for me. But I remember there was one time, this was years and years ago, because my nieces are now a little bit older, but it was like, I want to say my like youngest niece was maybe like, I don't know, 6 or 8 months. And it was like, I was in town at the time, needed to crash at my brother's, and I didn't sleep at all that night, because literally nonstop, it was just like crying in the background and finally stopping it, would pick up again. So I always want to give the disclaimer. It's like with parents, like it's just a phase, and like you got to take what you can get, make it
and not stress about it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Make it put a bow on it the best you can, but like you got what you got. And, hopefully it does, for most people as kids get older, things do get a little bit better. But, if we're talking about the kind of parent sector, it's like, hey, listen, man, like you just got to get really good at being real with yourself and really just checking in on like, okay, if I go to the gym, is it actually going to be a productive session? Am I gonna get something out of it? Or am I already like, here and I'm just going to put the nail in the coffin and like kind of push it down further, right? So it's like, being truthful though, because for real, it's like, even when I was a competitive CrossFitter, I used to work for a supplement company. And so I was always traveling, always on the road. And so same thing, it's like I would average 4 to 5 hours of sleep. And that was just like my normal. And to be honest, it's like, if I actually slept more, I would feel worse. Probably, it's like, we talk about this all the time, but it's like, sometimes your body does actually make you feel worse when it wants you to keep doing things. So it's like, that's common, especially with sleep, or you also see it a lot with like training, where it's like, if somebody doesn't take rest days and all they do is train. A lot of times when they do take that rest day, they actually feel worse, or they suddenly start feeling super sore. Recovery just like kind of, swan dives off a cliff. Mm-hmm. Same thing, with sleep. What I would actually experience and what kept me in the loop of like, oh, I know we're supposed to sleep more, but like I operate really well here. It's great. Is it's like truly, if I had nights that I would get 6 or 7 or 8 hours of sleep, I would actually feel more tired, more tired. I would feel, worse rather than, I feel like rested and rejuvenated. So I think again, it's like everybody is going to have different levels at which they thrive and which they feel good. So it's like, I really envy the people that are like, oh yeah, dude, I sleep like 9 to 10 hours a night. Like that has never been me, and that will never be me. I just like,
night owl.
Give me that gene, like God bless, right? But, it's like for most people, I think trying to aim for a minimum of 7 hours of sleep or more is probably a really reasonable goal, because it's like, I think that kind of around this, the 6 hours or less mark is again where we're kind of talking about like, things just really start to break down and not be, we're just not feeling so hot. But truly, it's checking in with yourself, and it's like old competitive CrossFit Laurie, # no rest days. We, it didn't matter how shitty I felt, like we were doing the thing. And in retrospect, I paid for that years and years later, right? I paid for all of that negligent. Sounds like such like a harsh word, but truly it's like, well, I paid for it for all the years that I struggled with my hormones, struggled with my thyroid and all of that stuff. I think there's that book titled, The Body is Always Keeping Score, but truly, it is. And so if we kind of frame things from that way, it's like, again, sleeping a little less here and there, having a sporadic trip that maybe you get less sleep, it's not the end all be all. But if the constant, again, it's like the constant theme, that's the problem. And I think much like we are talking about just, the monitoring and tracking your macros, it's like, using, I think the app is called Sleep Cycle, or using some sort of, again, like Garmin or Whoop or anything.
Like that, yeah.
It's like, it can be eye-opening because you'll be like, oh yeah, I totally get, X amount of sleep. And then you're like, oh,
yeah,
kidding.
Yeah, I used to wear a Whoop, and man, I was a couple of times I was like, yeah, I sleep really well. Like, that's awesome. And then I like wear the Whoop,
news.
And it's like, oh shit, you were up like tossing and turning. But yeah, I think also too, though, that can be kind of taken with a grain of salt because some of those things can like, really stress you out. So I guess main thing I think was for me, like with sleep is like try to get the best amount of sleep you can, but it's not going to help you to stress out about how much you're sleeping or not sleeping. Cause now that's kind of, I think, working against you because too much stress then can make it really hard to go to sleep. So, recognize like, where your shortcomings are. And then like I always tell people, try to like make small changes. So if you can get to bed at least like, even like 20 minutes earlier than you normally do, that's a good start.
And I think too, it's like, I think it's so fascinating to look at like a lot of the present day struggles that I deal with now as like a business owner versus like when I was a competitive athlete. It's like, I just had so much privilege during that time in my life because it's like, I was single, I lived alone, I had a very flexible job that like, I just wasn't working. Like I did the work and I did my job really well, but once I clocked out of work, I was good. I was done. It's like very, very controlled
life.
everything.
Yeah, controlled.
And so it's like, I used to be like also the queen of sleep routine because I used to train super early in the morning. So it's like, although I didn't sleep a lot, I still had my shit a lot more together in terms of like, it would be like, at 8:00, an alarm would go off on my phone. I would, pack all my food for the next day. I would pull out, my outfit. I would spend a little time like foam rolling and stretching, and then I'd take a shower. And, my goal would basically be like in bed by 9:00. And even if I wasn't necessarily, it's like I might still be like thumbing around on social media or whatever, but it's like I was at least in bed and like in the process of like shutting down. And it's like, I have just struggled so much present day, and my sleep has gotten so much worse as a business owner. Cause like I said, it's like, at the end of the day, there's some stuff that has to get done. And when you're really like the primary person that can only do certain tasks or certain things, it's like, it's just got to get done. Right. And so it's like, it's like, I'll get my sleep kind of roped in and dialed in. And then, like I said, it's like, it takes one launch weekend or it takes one thing to just like completely, shake the snow globe and toss it against the wall. But truly, it's like with your sleep stuff, it's like, the more you can make it a routine where it's like, hey, this is what time I go to bed. Hey, at this time we shut off the TV or we get off electronics. So it's like, that's definitely the way. But like I said, it's still mutually something I struggle with so much. And it's like, Charlie's not like that. It's like, Charlie will just be like, hey, cool. So I'm going to bed. Bye. And I'd be like, I wish I was going to bed. Shit, man.
Yeah. I'm in this cut right now and, I've got to be mindful about my sleep because I definitely do tend to stay up a little bit late too. You'll
be texting me sometime and I'll be like looking at the clock and I'll be like, I'm up because I'm in California, but
So that is something that, being more mindful about for sure during a cut for sure.
I think last point we would tack onto this too is it's like, just understand that sleep is often one of the first things to go when we are dieting. So again, it's like when our body is just trying to thrive and operate on less food, sleep's going to be the first thing. So it's like,
God, you ever have those like, when you're like deep in a diet and like you're just fucking hungry and you just cannot go to sleep. Like that's literally what that is.
Well, and I think, so I want to expand on this for a minute. It's like for so many years, I didn't realize how bad my sleep was because it was like before I like made the connection of like, oh, if you weren't always just dieting and trying to survive on like minimal calories. It was like, it was totally my normal to wake up 2 to 3 times a night, especially like the year that I competed at regionals, because we had one specific day that's like, we would always train really late because we needed to train as a team, somebody's job, whatever. And it was like, I had certain things where it was like, I knew if I trained hard after about 6:30 at night, so if I was kind of at the gym, say like 7:30 to 8, my sleep gonna be fucked. Same thing. It's like, I know that if I hit leg day specifically, if I were to hit a really heavy leg day really late at night, sleep off a cliff. Same thing. It's like, it was totally normal for me to wake up in the middle of the night and I would just be starving. And so it'd be like, I would like walk in the
go
kitchen.
And eat a piece of cheese.
No, like literally, it'd be like I would go like eat a banana or have like a banana, some instant oats and nut butter, and then basically you're spiking, you're spiking your insulin levels, cortisol levels drop, and you can get back to bed, right? But it's just like there were so many things that were just like giant ahas when I finally like came to Jesus and started like eating more food and just like understanding training more. But like I said, it's like I never made that connection of, oh, like I really need to watch how late I'm training at night, how hard I'm training. Like I said, it's like I know, and Charlie actually, like he had figured this out too. It's like, we know that it's like, if we're going to go to the gym super late, we will change around our schedule and do upper body. And it's just, again, it's like, if you think about it, it's like, well, if I'm dumbbell benching, maybe I have like 30s in each hand or something, but it's like, that just hits different than if I'm like, oh, so I'm going to hip thrust 365 pounds for sets of 10, and I'm going to back squat 11, it's just like so much CNS demand and stuff like that. So that would also just be a tip, is like, if you ever have a day that you're like, ooh, I'm going to the gym really late, swap it, go upper body, because it's not going to mess with your sleep as much. But same thing, it's like, I would just leave that gift that I wish I would have, figured out sooner. Is
That's
it's
a
like,
great tip.
If you're always waking up in the middle of the night hungry, you ain't eating enough food. Ignore, obviously, if you're dieting, everything is, trash anyway.
I mean, even still if you're dieting, but yeah.
But it's like, you play around then with, okay, well, could I eat a little bit closer to bedtime and hopefully kind of get you through that? Or same thing, just kind of changing. You got a lot of variables that you might be able to play with and kind of make better. But I think that's all we have for today.
Yeah. Crush another episode.